get cash, cause your body can't afford it. Don't you know who I am? You better give a damn. I'm with the band, man. Bask in my glory and tell me a story of how great you think I am.
Hey there, this is Eric, and I'm with the band, man. Super excited about this episode. We got Randy Larsen, vocalist, and depending on the band and the era, guitar and bass extraordinaire. Um, yeah, I was really thrilled to have this episode with Randy. Um, Cable kind of always seemed like one of those bands that has been around forever. And we're going to talk about this, or we already talked about this, but you're going to see in the episode here shortly that they were a little sneaky for me, if we're talking whatever stoner metal or whatever kind of weird subgenre we're gonna kind of put them in, or at least put them adjacent to. Um, their music still to this day, I think, remains kind of unlike and unique anything else that was kind of going on. And like we talked about, because they had enough bangers on their albums like Northern Failures and Gutter Queen, especially, were kind of the two albums that got me into them, because they had so many, we'll call them more traditional, more standard bangers on the album. um, Kind of got me into listening to the rest of their stuff, which again kind of went into the at least stoner metal adjacent kind of genre. But there's a pretty unique episode talking with Randy, kind of finding out what the secret is for the longevity for Cable, and kind of, by his own admission, that they were their own worst enemies as far as some of the tragedies that befell them, and why they didn't really continue that trajectory that they probably should have in the scene. Very, very candid episode. Randy was a great guy. Still is, kind of reaching out to him to get some of the information about this episode and everything else. Super, super amazing person. Slightly kind of bummed that nothing is on the horizon as far as new music or new bands or anything like that. But it sounds relatively promising. So that is always the note that I like to end on for these episodes, is that I'm talking to somebody who, especially in Randy's case, right? I mean, he's been a lifelong musician, interested in music for 30 plus years now. And that he's still going at it, right? Like he's still working on music, and that's always the best feeling to have when I'm ending one of these conversations with people, that that door has not shut, and then there's still, a potential future for new music and whatever else that might entail. So hope you enjoy this conversation with Randy, and stick around, and we'll see kind of what is in store for him in the future. Hey there, everybody. I am super stoked to be here with Randy, the man behind the guitar and the microphone for Cable and many other great bands, but I'll leave the introduction up to him since he knows himself better than me.
How's everyone doing? Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. I'm Randy. Actually, I only played guitar and cable in the very beginning, not consistently through. I switched to bass pretty early on. But anyway, I had a lot of small hardcore punk bands before cable, but none of those are really worth mentioning. Demo bands and stuff like that. So cable was the first real band that did a lot of substantial stuff. So I did bass and vocals in that. And then I was in a band called Empty Flowers for a while. Bass and vocals in that. I was in the band ISIS for a brief stint in the very beginning on second guitar. Um, I was in a band called Slow Death for a while, where I played bass and vocals. Then I switched to just vocals. I played bass in the band Tombs. Um, Never recorded with them, just did some touring, some shows with them. The last active band I was in was called Come to Grief from New Hampshire, Massachusetts area. It's basically the old sludge band Grief, kind of the original member of that reformed the band but changed the name to Come to Grief. So it's really a different band from Grief. But I played bass on their first album, but never played live with them. So, and then a lot of other little things sprinkled in between. But those are the main things.
Wow, Randy, sounds like we have a whole bunch to talk about tonight. So thanks
Sure.
again for coming on.
Yeah.
Um, I normally start this by kind of talking about like what brought you into my radar, kind of you what was my first kind of deep dive into any one of your bands. So it was definitely Cable, and I was trying to figure that out when I was preparing for this. Because I think Cable for me, uh, kind of now knowing some of the other bands you were in, I think it makes a lot more sense. At the time when I first heard Cable was probably 97, 98-ish. And I wasn't listening to anything else, and probably to this day still haven't really listened to anything that sounds similar to Cable. So they were kind of like a Trojan horse band for me. But it was Clinton Street Blues was the first song that I heard, and it must have been on a sampler, but I was checking through Discogs today. I was looking through like my box of samplers, and I was like, I don't know what sampler it was on, but I feel like it was on a sampler. I listened to this, like, this is an amazing, amazing hardcore song. And then I bought Gutter Queen and like the two opening tracks, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. Um, I was like, is this the same band? Is this the same kind of music? This is completely different. And then like Clinton Street Blues hits, and then it gets faster and heavier, and the songs get a little shorter. And then like the album was kind of all over the place. And then like later on, like I'm talking about Cable to my friends, they're like, oh, like they're stoner rock. And I'm like, well, what the heck is stoner rock? And they're like, well, here, let me play some stoner rock albums for you. And I was like, it's not really my thing. But for whatever reason, Cable, like I said, you were like the Trojan horse, and you kind of tricked me in there, and like it worked, and I followed you guys throughout the progression. So I don't know how you did it. I'm sure that wasn't your intention, but congratulations.
Yeah, well, thank you. And yeah, I believe that sampler you're talking about, I think there were two different Hydra Head Records samplers. Um, I should have pulled them out. I think I have them somewhere, but um, and I believe Clinton Street Blues was on one of those samplers. It might have been on both of them, honestly. I'm not sure, but I think that's probably where you heard that. Um, yeah, I appreciate you saying that you haven't heard a lot of bands that sound like we sound, because honestly, that was like the mission from day one in starting the band, was to try to do something different. I mean, we all of us came up through the punk and the hardcore scenes, and around the time we formed Cable, it's not that we were getting out of the punk and the hardcore scene, but we were all becoming kind of bored and disenchanted with the way things were going. Like hardcore was getting very tough, which none of us were into. I'm old enough to see that transition between, like, no disrespect to any particular bands, but like the Madball, Hatebreed, that kind of hardcore just wasn't for me. So I was kind of looking for something else. A couple of the other guys came from more of a punk background. And with the popularity of like Green Day or Nirvana, a lot of punk was just kind of getting. There was still good punk out there for sure, but it was way down. And I think we were all just kind of looking for something different to do. We started to discover bands like Neurosis and the amphetamine reptile records bands, like the noise rock scene and the touch and go record scene, and like post punk and stuff like that. And we kind of borrowed a lot of influences from all that stuff, a little bit of the metal, underground metal stuff, but more so like the noise rock and the post punk and stuff like that, and just kind of tried to make it our own thing, and that was the genesis of where the band started. It went to some vastly different places, but that's kind of the attitude we had, is we wanted to do our own thing. We didn't want to sound like anyone else.
I think that definitely makes sense. Thinking of you guys as kind of like a protest to what was, popular within the scene. Like you said, the pop punk infusion was definitely making that particular sound kind of what a lot of bands were striving for. And then yeah, you're right that there was that whole like tough guy hardcore thing that was going on, and that makes perfect sense. Um, so then let's put a pin in that. Let's start back, I guess, a little bit earlier. Like how did you earliest memories of like music? Like, did you grow up in a musical household? Did your parents play music for you at all? Do you have older siblings or cousins or?
Yeah, I remember my oldest sister wasn't so much into music, but my parents definitely were. Um, they were really, really into country music. Um, and back when I was young, listening to country music with my parents, a lot of country music was actually good. Um, Not like what it turned into. Now it's like a Applebee's commercial. It's like, that's considered country music, and it's taken some weird roads. But I grew up with Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, Hank Williams, all that kind of stuff. So that's just what was always playing in the house, in the car. So it wasn't until I get a little older that I kind of branched out on my own and started getting into some other stuff. But definitely in the house, it was a lot in the car and whatnot. It was a lot of country music, a lot of Merle Haggard 8-tracks in my dad's station wagon.
I mean, you could have done a lot worse. So yeah.
I agree, because but when I really hated and rejected that stuff when I was like a teenager, and then I came full circle, and I love that stuff. I mean, I kind of burnt myself out on it, to be honest, because in like the late '90s, I took a deep dive back into all that stuff I grew up with, and I would listen to a lot of it all the time. I still love it, but I've kind of, over the years, I've kind of taken a break from it. But it did come full circle for sure.
I mean, compared to like you could have been listening to or exposed to like Kiss and the Bee Gees or something. I mean, like I said, it could have been way worse.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I was never a Bee Gees fan, but the first time I bought a record, not even with my own money, but the first time my parents bought me a record for me, it was a Kiss record.
Wow.
Yeah, and I wasn't even really a Kiss fan. I didn't even really. I might have knew a Kiss song or two from the radio, but it was just I was more taken by the artwork
Of course.
in the store. I was like, "What? Whoa! What is this? This is weird looking." So the first handful of records I bought were Kiss records, and I'm a casual Kiss fan. I'm not one of those Kiss maniacs. They're fun for a couple songs sometimes or whatever, but not really my thing overall.
So you grew up kind of surrounded by, that first generation of country music, um, especially kind of with a lot of those protest roots and everything. Did that kind of set you down a path musically, at least, the aesthetics of and politics of what all that meant?
Uh, yeah, I mean that definitely piqued my interest in music in general. Um, a lot of those songs and the lyrics of what they were saying really didn't click so much with me until like my second journey back to that. When I
Okay.
was a kid, I didn't really, I wasn't really intently listening to the lyrics or whatever. So yeah, I mean that was my start, and then I just started listening to the radio. I'd be getting ready for school in the morning, and I found the rock station, classic rock station, whatever. And that's where I got introduced to like, like Pink Floyd and Zeppelin and Sabbath. I guess, backing up a little bit, actually, before that, we didn't have cable television when I was a kid because we lived kind of far out and we didn't get cable television. We didn't have access to it until later. But there was a show on Friday night called Friday Night Videos. And they would play videos like MTV, but we didn't have MTV or any of that stuff. So I got into like ZZ Top and Men at Work and Quiet Riot, all that, the big 80s stuff, But then I started kind of venturing off from that. I discovered classic rock was really, Pink Floyd, Zeppelin, and my first real and insane obsession with music was Ozzy.
Okay.
Not even Black Sabbath. I didn't know. It took me like a couple years as a kid to realize that Ozzy sang for Black Sabbath. I had no recollection. Like, I just knew of Ozzy, It like blew my mind when I found out, oh, he sings for this other band and they have like 7 or 8 albums. And it was like kind of mind blowing. But Ozzy Osbourne's like the first 3 solo records. That was my obsession, like, for a couple years. That's what really sent me down the path of like being obsessed with music.
And then, so you're what, like, I don't know, 11, 12, something like that around this time?
Yeah, maybe even probably maybe 10, but I think more like 11, 12.
Is this when you start thinking about like, hey, I should pick up guitar, or?
It was a few years after that. I mean, I thought about it, but I never really acted on it. It wasn't until when I started to dip my toe into the punk and hardcore world that, it always, like, people always say, like, you see these big bands, these big rock and metal bands, and they seem like these giants and like no one can do that, but then when you get into punk, you realize anybody can do this, So that was the big turning point for me as far as wanting to play or acting, like buying a bass, buying a guitar, trying to start a band. Any of that was at the very beginnings of getting into punk. But back when I was listening to more of the rock and the Ozzy and stuff like that, I would think about it, but it was more like it was an unattainable dream. It's like, yeah, I want to play center field for the Yankees too, but it's not going to happen. So it wasn't until the punk thing where I acted on it and bought a bass and tried to figure out how to play.
Yeah, I mean, I remember too, like when I was a kid, like my dad would make me watch like whatever Van Halen music videos, and I would see like Eddie Van Halen shredding, and like, yeah,
Right.
I don't think that's for me. Like that's
Right.
that's not going to be in my skill set. So,
Yeah.
so then I guess what got you into punk? Was there like a local scene, or again, was it like a family member, or because this is obviously pre-internet era, so it had to
Yeah.
be, you know, word of mouth somehow.
It's interesting. Like I said, there was nothing where I grew up. There was no scene. There was no clubs. There was no cool record stores. Like, I was buying records at a department store, what saved my life along with punk was skateboarding.
Okay.
Somehow, and I don't know how, I bought a skateboard. I had never seen, like, I don't know. This is one thing I can't remember. Is I don't know how I got the idea to get into skateboarding. But I bought a skateboard, and then that led me to Thrasher magazine and a local bike shop in my town. There was a bicycle shop, and then they started to carry like a couple skateboards in Thrasher magazine and Transworld skateboarding magazine. So and they also rented like the skateboard videos, like the old Vision and Paul Peralta videos. I don't know if you're ever a skateboarder, but and what got me into punk was seeing I believe it was a Vision skateboard video, and there was Agent Orange was in it and TSOL was in it. Those are the first real punk bands that I ever heard, and it was just game on from there. Then I couldn't get enough of it, and that was like my 8th grade. So going into high school, there was a girl on my bus, and I don't know, I had a Meyer Threat shirt on or something, and she's like, "Oh, my boyfriend likes that stuff," and I'm like, I didn't know anybody who liked any of that stuff. So, and he was a few years older than me. He was like a junior or something in high school. So she ended up connecting us. And then I found out there was a handful of people. There was like 4 or 5 of us. And those guys kind of took me under their wing and they took me to my first shows. They took me record shopping. They took me skateboarding, like up in Boston and Providence. And I kind of owe a huge debt to all those guys, you know, for I was the young kid they kind of just took under their wing. And it was just game on from there. Once I went to my first show and bought my first punk records, I kind of never looked back, you know.
It's amazing. I would say well over 90% of everybody I've talked to, like their entry into punk and hardcore was skateboarding. And I don't think, I don't think that debt can ever be repaid by punk and like it's
No.
this the scene wouldn't exist if it wasn't for skateboarding. It's insane. And like
Yeah.
to your point, I owned a skateboard. I was never really a skateboarder. Like I tried and it wasn't for me. But like that whole culture and like that's kind of what spoke to me more than actual skateboarding. Because again, like I would occasionally go and watch people skateboard and I'm like, ooh, like I don't know if I want to fall off the rail on my balls like that. Like that's not for me.
Right. Yeah, it is the culture. I mean, I guess in a way, like the early skateboarding days. I mean, I feel like it's maybe changed quite a bit now. I could be wrong. I'm very not in touch with that world anymore. But that was very counterculture. Like when I used to skateboard, you know, I decided when I was a freshman in high school and I got into all punk and everything that this was going to be my haircut pretty much for life, you know. So, and it sounds crazy when I talk to younger people today. Like when I had my head shaved as a freshman in high school in 1986, there were like jocks that wanted to kick my ass for having my head shaved, or for wearing a Minor Threat shirt, or for having a Misfits patch on the back of my jacket. Like it was it was so insane. Like they didn't understand it. They were threatened by it. You know, so like the handful of us had to like stick together. And there was plenty of times we had to like fight and we had to swing our skateboards at people and we had to fight jocks. And it was just crazy, you know, it's so crazy to see how things are now. Well, maybe not now is a great example because the world's pretty fucked right now
Yes.
too, in sort of similar ways. But yeah, like now, like I mean, having your head shaved for the last 30 years, like everybody has their head shaved. It's just not it's not a big deal. But that's just the time I grew up in, you know. So like even the skateboarding part of it was very counterculture and very much like fuck you to society and to the normal shit. You know, like I said, I grew up in a farm town pretty much with a lot of hicks, a lot of racism, a lot of sexism, a lot of just negative, shitty stuff. So I am one of those people who pledges that punk rock saved my life for sure. Because if I didn't discover that and I stayed in that town, I probably would have ended up just like the rest of them, you know. And I'm thankful every day I didn't.
I mean, there's a lot to be said, because I mean, obviously a little later down the line, but I mean, my hometown was pretty similar. We were like very rural, right? People were very like even northern Indiana, people are still flying their Confederate flags, and it's like you guys know that we were in the North, first of all, but hooray for you for racism. But it's
Yeah,
the same way. Like if it wasn't for punk and hardcore, like broadening horizons, who
right,
knows what would have happened? Like maybe I would have gotten sunk down into that, and that would have been my worldview because I would have been so limited with my blinders on. So
right. If you don't know,
yeah.
if you don't, if you don't find this stuff or you don't make an effort to find this stuff, it's easy just to get swallowed up in that world. You meet a girl, you have a couple of kids, and you just end up in that vortex of not good stuff. So I am very thankful for that it shaped the way I look at everything. Still to this day, I'm 53 years old, and I look at everything in my life. I try to look through that lens of like, like how would the punks do this? Like, so it's just something that stays with you, man. I've talked to many people over the years, and you seem like you're kind of the same way. Like, there's an importance to this stuff, whether it's punk or hardcore or underground metal, or now it's so everything is just
Mhm.
it's all this big thing now. It's not really. But all that underground stuff, man, is very very important. It really is.
So, you're a freshman in high school now at this point. You've got, three or four other people that have kind of taken you under their wing. you start to go to shows now, and you're like 14, and like are your folks cool then with you traveling to Boston and Providence to go to these shows, and they're not imagining the worst potential outcome for what happens at a punk show with their 14-year-old son?
I had amazingly cool parents. Like it was basically all my mom because my dad was a truck driver, so wasn't around a lot. He was always on the road working. So my mom was amazingly cool about it. She never really said no, you can't go. I'd be like, yeah, can I go to a show in Providence with these guys that are like 2 years older than me? And she's like, they have a car. She's like, yeah, go. I was lucky, because a lot of friends, and this came up even when I got my car a few years later, a lot of people that were like 16 and 17, their parents like, you're going where? No, you know, yeah, I was going to shows with those guys in Providence, Boston. I even went to a show at CB's in 1988. We took the
Wow.
train down there. My mom was cool with it. So I thank her too, because, I was able to go out and do these things and have these experiences at such a young age that formed, the rest of my life. So
That's another positive thing to be said about all ages shows as well, that you were able to go and get welcomed and enjoy them at that age. And, you didn't have to wait around until you were 18 or whatever in order to do the
right.
shows. So,
Also, very early on when I was getting into this stuff, I was turned on to straight edge, and that I really pushed that point with my parents too, and I let them know, like, look at these lyrics on this record, and like I have this X in my hand, and this means like this, and I think they were like that helped. They probably would have let me go anyway, but I never came home. At least in those early days, I never came home, reeking of liquor or smashed or really got in any trouble or anything like that. So I did myself a favor in that, that would change not too long down the road, but in those early days, for sure, like the straight edge thing was like a big thing.
cool. So then, you guys are starting to go to shows. Obviously, you're kind of fully within the punk scene then at that point. So that's when you start looking. And do you start with bass? Do you start with guitar? Do you kind of do both, or?
I started with bass just because one of those older guys, the guy who I became, more friendly with, he was a guitar player. So, and he knew a guy who kind of played drums. So that left me to either play bass or sing. And he appointed me the bass player. I didn't choose to play bass. He's like, you should get a bass and an amp and you can play bass for this band that didn't exist at the time, but he was trying to put together. So that's why I bought a bass. I would become the singer for the next band I did with him. But I started out on bass. I had no clue what I was doing. My parents were cool enough. They took me to a music store. They bought me a bass. They bought me an amp. And they also told me, like, you're gonna, like, in a month or two, you're never gonna touch this stuff. And I just let my mom know all the time that I'm still touching that stuff. And it didn't stop.
Yeah.
They were very supportive. They were cool. They bought me a bass and an amp, and I had no. Of course, they wanted me to take lessons. So to appease them, I went to one lesson, and it was not my thing. So I just kind of learned on my own. I had no clue what I was doing though. I would play bass like with my thumb, like over the top of the neck. I just had no idea. Um, and I quickly learned that wasn't the way you play bass. So I just kind of figured it out. The guitar player, he knew a couple bar chords, and none of them were any good. None of us were any good at all at that point. So we just kind of fumbled from band to band. This guy would leave. We'd find a new drummer who couldn't play drums, but his parents bought him a drum set, so he'd figure out how to play drums. It took a few go rounds before we could actually have a band. We could write songs and record a demo and play a couple shows.
Yeah, I'm always like in my mind, I always think about like this weird that nobody would ever watch because it wouldn't actually be funny outside of my mind, but like a punk hardcore like community sketch series where like somebody goes in and they want to be like a whatever a hardcore guitarist, and they go in and they're asking the guitar teacher about like drop D, and he's like, no, like we don't do drop D there. And like, what do you mean we don't do drop D? Like, what do you mean you're not going to teach me power chords? What is going on?
Right. I mean, that's all you need to learn to start.
Yeah.
You learn a couple power chords, you can play something. And then from there, I don't know. I mean, I've always thought about going back and taking lessons, and trying to learn more. I don't know. I know barely nothing about music. I can't read music. Um, I just learned when I joined that band, Coming to Grief, the last band I was, active band I was in, I just learned how to read tab, um, which everyone's like, you can't read tab. I'm like, no idea. So it's really easy, actually. Anybody can read tab if they just, it's just the dots on the neck and where to play them. It's really easy. It's not like sheet music. That's a whole different animal. But I was just never interested in any of that. I just want to play. I want to write songs. I want to go play. I don't want to be the best at doing scales and shredding and all that kind of stuff. I always just want to play. I just want to go do stuff.
So obviously, you mentioned at the beginning that by the time Cable forms, you're kind of trying to move away from what the other bands in the scene were doing. As far as these earlier bands, what were your guys' influences? Like, what were you trying to sound like through your different iterations of trying to learn your instruments and switch around band members and everything?
Uh, Early Boston hardcore, early New York hardcore, the Discord stuff. Although we could never play. That's the thing with those DC guys; they can play. So some of the Midwest stuff, Negative Approach, Necros, early Necros, stuff like that. MDC, DRI, early COC, Circle Jerks, Black Flag was a huge one for me, especially. Once again, we could never play like Black Flag, but they're still one of my favorite bands. Not my favorite band, but we really, growing up in Connecticut, we're really connected. The cool thing about Connecticut, there's not many cool things about Connecticut, but the cool thing is you're 30 or 40 minutes from Providence. You're an hour and a half from Boston. You can get to New York, depending where you are in the state, in an hour and a half, 2 hours, an hour. So you could kind of go to shows all over the place. So there was so much stuff. And that was like, we had the Anthrax Club down in Norwalk, which I'm sure you've at least heard about.
Mhm.
That was like our CBGBs. So we were very fortunate. There was always tons of shows. And that was right around the time like the Revelation Records was started in New Haven, Connecticut. So we were very influenced by like all that stuff, especially like like the first Rev comp, the Together 7-inch comp, and all that kind of stuff for sure. So the first band I was in that ever actually could like play a little bit and could make a demo tape was called Stand Clear, and we played some shows. We played at the Anthrax with Sick of It All. We played with Super Touch once in Albany,
Wow.
New York, once in Massachusetts. We played with 24/7 Spies and Upfront. We played with Absolution. So we were kind of in that late '80s hardcore thing. That was our big thing.
Cool. So then, obviously you're doing all this, and then, I guess how many different one of these bands, and how long did this era last until kind of Cable forms?
The Cable formed in '94, so basically from like '88, '89, it was like every year I had some different kind of iteration of a hardcore band.
Okay.
A couple of guys would break off and we do another band. And then eventually I left those guys I met in high school kind of behind as I started to meet people. They kind of dropped out, and they just got married, had kids, whatever they did, got into different shit. And I would meet people. I'd keep going to shows and meet people. And, it was so local with like Providence and Massachusetts and New York. You could kind of like always keep something going. So I did a few more bands. I did a band called Momentum where that was the first band I really played guitar in that did anything. We played some shows, recorded a demo, recorded a 7-inch that never came out. But we played, it was like that early '90s stuff. We would play with like Eye for an Eye, um, Kingpin, Arise. I don't know if you know any of those bands, but they were like early Boston, no, or not early '90s Boston bands, stuff like that. We played with Mouthpiece and Resurrection and like a lot of those kind of bands. Um, then after that, like a year later, I got into like a lot of the like Citizen's Arrest and Born Against and all that kind of stuff. So I did a band called God's End that was more of like a power violence, kind of more like fast hardcore band. There's like, there was like every year leading up to Cable, I had some new band trying to do some new thing, some new brand of hardcore that was popular at the time until Cable, and then it all just kind of changed.
So then, any of these bands, obviously, you guys were playing shows around. Did you ever leave kind of like New England, or was it all just that
Uh,
area for your shows?
yeah, it was always Connecticut, uh, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and then like the early bands. I think we never played New York City. We played in Albany um, a handful of times, but it wasn't until Cable where it was like the idea of touring or playing like a lot of I say out of state, I kind of mean out of the tri-state area. Um, Going down to Richmond or going out to Ohio or any of that stuff. That wasn't until Cable. Those other bands there were two like ramshackle pieced together, like guys are always coming and going, and no one was ever really that serious about it long enough to take that next step.
Then I guess walk me through the formation of Cable, right? Since you've been building up to that for a while now. How do you kind of get those fellas together, and
Um,
how that kind of come about? Or were you the one who pitched the idea, like, hey, let's chart our own course, let's do something unique and different?
there was one of those yearly hardcore bands I did. Another one was called Outrage, and this guy John Hinkle was the singer. We did a demo once again, played a couple shows. He moved to like the middle of the state. I lived in the eastern part of the state. He moved to like Manchester, Connecticut, which is in the middle of the state. So we kind of lost touch for a little while, and then he got in touch with me. He's like, "Hey, I'm doing a new band out here called Structure, and it's like similar to what we were doing, like a melodic hardcore band kind of thing." He's like, "Would you be interested in playing second? We're looking for a second guitar player. I want to play second guitar." So I was like, "Yeah, sure." So we scheduled a practice for me to come jam or try out with those guys or whatever, and that's how I met Vic, the drummer of Cable, and Jeff, who ended up being the bass player of Cable in the beginning. We're both in this band Structure, um, which I had met those guys at a Fugazi show at the University of Connecticut, like not long before that, but I didn't realize Vic was trying to sell me like a zine he was doing or something. And I didn't realize till I got to that band practice, like, oh, you're the guy that sold me that zine. So we had met, but like that first band practice was the first time we all met. And that was another super short. We tried to play one show out in Newport, Rhode Island, and half the people in the band got lost getting to the show. So like half of us were there. So we never played the show. That's how I met those guys. And that show ended up being well, we didn't play, but that was the last show for that band Structure. So I don't know if it was my idea or Vic's idea or Jeff's idea. I think it was my idea. Like they were like, we don't want to do this band anymore. I'm like, well, let's start something new. And that was kind of how Cable happened. That was kind of the initial spark of us getting together.
So then, initially then, I know you already mentioned you're looking, for like kind of that AMRAP noise rock sound. I mean, was that what I know you said the other guys were kind of came from the punk scene. I mean, did you guys have what you'd consider to be like the quintessential records that you kind of wanted to use as the foundation when you first like did you guys have a band practice and okay, let's listen to these records and this is what we want to sound like, or did everybody bring in all these disparate sounding bands and then try to make a mishmash and
Well, the funny thing is, like the real early versions of the band were like we're just trying to practice the first 3 or 4 times and figure it out. Um, we had some different people. There was this guy who played bass with us, like a couple practices. A guy who played guitar with us. Um, he did play the first show we played, but that was it. But we all found like a connection in bands like besides punk and well, these are punk and hardcore bands, but they were different, like Into Another, Shudder to Think. We all found common ground amongst those bands. But the first Snapcase album, Looking Glass Self, had just come out. So like we were all enamored with that guitar. You know, are you familiar with Snapcase?
Yes,
The
definitely.
guitar harmonics. So like it's funny. I wish we had like a practice tape or something, but the first 2 or 3 cable practices, we were trying to write songs that were almost sounded like Snapcase Looking Glass Self, and quickly realized that wasn't going to work, you know? Uh, so we kind of scrapped the 2 or 3 songs we were working on and just kind of started over. And the first song we played together that I wrote was a song called Plastic, and that had a very different feel. It was on our demo. I didn't really know how to play guitar that well, even though I'd been playing guitar in bands for years. So I just kind of started making up my own chords. And that's how like the noisy element of cable became a thing, because I was just kind of trying to make up chords that did not sound like power chords, you know, or Snapcase. And that's just kind of happened naturally. It wasn't even really like, oh, let's try to sound like Rorschach or try to sound like some noisier band. It was just kind of what happened, and it clicked right away, and it just kind of naturally happened. Like we kind of stumbled upon something. We figured everyone would hate it, you know, which at first, surprisingly, a lot of people, at least locally, seemed to like it, which was to our surprise. All the stuff that ended up on the record behind you with the tan cover, yeah, the
Yep.
demos and the 7-inch and stuff, that was all within that, you know, that first couple of years. But we were just figuring out, man. We didn't know what we were doing. We had a local club, which me and Vic, the drummer, both booked shows at, and we played there countless times. That was where we kind of figured it out, you know. Like we would have band practices, but like we'd play like at least 2 times a month there. So we had a chance to figure it out in front of people. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like we like tricked people into liking it. I don't know. I feel like we played so much, people were just like, yeah, it's not that bad. I kind of like it.
I mean, it again, right? I think especially at that time, you know, I think Snapcase is a good exception, but I think that there were a lot of bands that were kind of honing in on whatever that sound was that a lot of bands tried to chase. And because you guys went a different direction, anybody who was looking for something different, like they had, especially, you know, locally, they had a different flavor that they could go for. So, I mean,
Yeah, and you know, we were getting into like the Ebullition Records scene and all those labels like Old Glory Records, Art Monk Construction. We kind of like found our niche sort of in that, because you know we came from like the punk and hardcore scene, so like we couldn't play shows with the Jesus Lizard. Like no one wanted anything to do with us. You know what I mean? Like in that scene, because that was like adults. That was like adult punk, you know, and we weren't quite there yet. We were still kind of kids. We didn't really know how to get shows at like real clubs. A lot of those bands played at like real venues and shit, you know. So we kind of found our niche in like the world somewhere between like Ebullition Records and some of the oddball bands that were like Dead Guy, for instance, was a band that we played with a lot and became friendly with. And we were just, I think we kind of felt like a kindred spirit. Like they were trying to do their own thing and like escape the hardcore tropes. And we were trying to do the same thing. So we ended up playing a lot with them. I booked their first show in Connecticut, and they ended up playing at that Studio 158 was the venue I worked at, and Vic worked at. And we played there with them a bunch. We booked them there a bunch, and we started to find bands like that, you know, like, oh, like these guys are on Victory Records, but they don't sound like Strife, you know, or whatever. They're doing their own thing, and even like a band like Bloodlet, we played with a lot too. We were like, yeah, they're way more metal, but they were still just weirdos doing their own thing, you
yes.
know, and somehow swimming in the same pool as a lot of just like that common hardcore that I was kind of not, I was getting out of. And a funny example of existing around that time is there was one time we played a matinee show in Providence with Mouthpiece, Chokehold, and another like kind of straight hardcore band. And then later that night, we drove across town to like this place called AS220, which like way more of an artsy kind of noise vibe going on. And we played a show there with a Glaze Baby, Marjan Crash, and all these like weird Providence kind of like noise art rock bands. And I don't think either anyone liked us at either show, but there was no one there from either show besides us. You
Yeah.
know, it was like we were just trying to play wherever we could, and like we had so many connections in the hardcore world, it was easy to play those shows. But honestly, we didn't really want to play those shows. We wanted to play the weird noise art shows, but like they didn't. They're like, who are these kids? Like, what is this? Who are these guys? They were all like cool, you know, like smoking clove cigarettes, and like they were like, who are these dorks? You know, so we could never really find our place, which could be frustrating at times. Although we kind of made our own bed by just we didn't want to sound. We wanted to just do our own thing musically, but it would have been nice to find like somewhere to fit in. I don't feel like we ever did that. I still don't feel like we have, even as the years went on and we changed kind of the sound of the band numerous times. I still don't feel like we ever found a place to land, which, you know, it's cool though. I don't care really.
No, I mean, one of the things that I think attracts me to Cable is that you have kind of that unique stature within the scene that, like, somebody comes up to me like, "Hey, who does if I want to get into Cable, what band do you think sounds closest to them?" I would be like, I there's really no direct comparison I can make. So that's good for you guys, right? Like you charted your own path, like you said.
That's it may not be good in the sense of like being successful.
Yeah.
I don't care. Like to me, that's more of a compliment to me than being able to play to 500 people a night and all that kind of stuff. Which would have been cool too. But that's more important to me, especially as I get older and I can look back on this stuff. Like, yeah, we just never wanted to be part of like a club. Like a lot of that hardcore and punk is very like, especially as time went on, it was like all these. Here's the straight edge, straight edge bands used to play with all different bands, and then as time went on, it just everything started to get very homogenized and like all these scenes within scenes, and it's like I don't know, we just want to play. We just want to play loud and just do what we did, and yeah, I like that people can't say, oh, like right here, where do you start? It's all the records are different. If you hear the first record compared to the last record, I mean, it's doesn't even sound like the same band.
No, absolutely not. So now I'm curious because, like you said, you start off with guitar, and your whole thing was, you know, learning how to play in your style while you're playing guitar and Cable, and then not wanting to play power chords. So that's kind of the evolution of how you guys became kind of noisy. And then
Right.
you pretty quickly switched over to bass. So then, did they look at you and say, okay, I want to play kind of in the same style that Randy played, or were you kind of helping with some of the songwriting then on the guitar as well, even though you were at bass at that point?
Well, when I switched to bass was I left the band for a summer after we recorded those singles and the demo and all that. I left the band for a summer, and they got another guitar player who ended up being Bernie Romanowski, who would end up being in the band, play on every record. He kind of replaced me, and we had another guy that was singing with us at the time as just the singer. Because through the history of the band, I've always tried to like not be the front man. I've tried multiple different times to like not be the front man, but it just never worked out that way. But they got this guy Bernie to play guitar and sing, and he had seen us a bunch of times. And he was a fan. I use that word loosely, a fan. So he was kind of familiar at that point with what we were doing, and like he would kind of watch the kind of chord. He was a better guitar player than me, but he'd look at the chords. He's like, well, "What is that chord you're playing?" And I'm like, "I don't know, man. It's just doing this." So he was like into the spirit of what we were doing. So it was kind of an easy transition. He took my spot, and then they played a handful of shows and stuff without me. They never recorded anything, not in those days, without me. And then I got a call one day from Vic, and he was like, "Hey, we're thinking about getting rid of this lead singer guy and getting rid of our bass player. Would you have any interest in coming back and playing bass and doing vocals?" Because they knew I had played bass, before. So I agreed to do that. And when I came back, I just started writing on bass. But I would still use a lot of those same chords that I played on guitar on bass. I've always played a ton of chords on bass. Now, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't say that like, oh yeah, I play all these chords. Like I just play power chords or like this weird chord I found on the guitar. I just do it on bass. So I would just write the same way on bass as I did on guitar. So it was kind of a seamless transition. When I came back to the band on bass, it was just, we just were sailing, nothing really changed. There was no weird dynamic. And I was still the main songwriter, and Bernie would write songs too. He wrote quite a few Cable songs. But I would say I was the main songwriter. So I would just write on bass instead of guitar. I didn't touch a guitar for years after I started playing bass and Cable.
So I'm guessing then when you did leave for that summer, you left on good terms. Like, were you going to
Uh, they,
school
weren't,
or?
they weren't happy that I left. So, but we remained friends. I think they were pretty pissed off because the band was just starting to kind of get legs. Yeah, I don't know. I was with this girl, and I thought like, oh, I'm going to settle down with this girl, and I was going to go to school and learn how to drive a tractor trailer, kind of
Ooh.
like my dad did. I don't. Looking back, it was like really stupid. Like I don't know what I was thinking, but anyway, that idea got old pretty quick. So when I got the call to come back, I jumped at it. And then no more girl. no more dreams of truck driving. It was just rock and roll after that. So yeah. My idea was I was going to go to like tractor trailer school and get my CDL and be this like long haul trucker, and settle down with this girl, and that was not in the cards.
I think the musical world is better off because of that. So, I mean,
I don't know about that, but thank you.
so then obviously they welcome you back with open arms, and then you switch over to the bass. You're playing similarly to how you were playing guitar.
Yeah.
And obviously then the guitarist who replaced you was kind of imitating your style. So then how does the band evolve throughout time? Like, does your playing style change because you kind of started off as a protest? Were you further protesting against some of the things you heard in like the noise rock arena, or were your influences changing, or like I guess what brought about that weird evolution of Cable as a band where every album sounds completely different?
Yeah. Uh, yeah. Well, I mean, the first album, Variable Speed Drive, I mean, it's not that much of a stretch from the demo and the
Mhm.
singles and stuff. It's kind of in the same world. And, and then there's the lineup change thing happened. And then, I don't know, man, we would do these things where we would camp out. My parents had like this, a decent sized piece of property. So, around around the time I connected with the band, we started writing Variable Speed Drive, and I was on bass. Um, we all kind of started, partying, started drinking, and there was really not much of that going on in the early days at all. Um, and that would lead us, like, we do these big campouts in my parents' back, like, away in the backyard. We had like a big fire pit, and we'd bring their tent, and we would just put on the classic rock station. And it was kind of like we're almost. I knew a lot of this stuff. I mean, everyone knows that stuff growing up. It's you hear it, it just becomes part of you. But like there's this station. I can't remember the name of it. It was like 103.7 out of Rhode Island, and they would play album sides instead of songs on Friday nights. So like they'd play like side one of Dark Side of the Moon, side one of Black Sabbath Paranoid, side one of a Skinnerd record or an Allman Brothers record. So I don't know. We just all started like listening to a lot of that stuff, as well as old country. That's when I kind of started reconnecting with and we would still listen to the heavy stuff and the punk and the noise rock and kind of everything, man. It was just like, I don't know. We just put it in a blender and like, the transition from Variable Speed Drive to Gutter Queen. Um, and a lot, when I listen back to that stuff, a lot of that record seems like, yeah, this isn't really that different from Variable Speed Drive until you get to the song you mentioned earlier, Clinton Street Blues. And that opening riff with that like bluesy, you know, I was a big fan of I Hate God. I was a big fan of Buzz Oven. I was getting in Sleep and the early Clutch stuff. And so, and of course, Sabbath. I was getting kind of rediscovering Sabbath and all that. So when I wrote that song and played that riff, that was like the moment I can point to, which kind of informed where the band would go from there. So that's when we kind of started to get away from the more just like super chaotic, noisy, discordant stuff and throw some of those kind of like traditional bluesy riffs, sludgy, stoner, whatever you want to call it. That was kind of the beginning of the end there. Then, like, especially me and Vic, the drummer, we kind of dove into that. We found that stoner rock scene and a lot of that stuff. And we kind of, but we never fit in there either because of the vocals. We would play those shows and people would be like, what is going on with the vocals? Some people would love it because they never saw anything like that. I'm getting off track. I'm sorry, but we played this like stoner rock fest in Ohio. It was like Stoner Hands of Doom or whatever, one of those things. And it was like 3 days of like, there were some cool bands, don't get me wrong, but man, it's just like band after band trying to sound like Monster Magnet, trying to sound like Clutch. And it was like the singer who isn't really that great of a singer, but trying to do like the bluesy thing. And like, we played like towards the end of the day on Saturday. So there had been a lot of these bands that played already. And we just got up there, man, and like attacked them, and they weren't ready for, I mean, they were super into it though. Like after the first song, they were kind of after the jarring of the first, like, they were like, people were into it. Like people were coming into the room instead of leaving the room. And we played one of the worst sets we ever played. It was horrible. We had mistakes, tons of technical problems. It was awful. And when we got off stage, people were like freaking out. That was amazing. And we're like, what? And it just had to be because we brought something different to the table. So we never really fit in that world either because of the aggression of the vocals, or a lot of those bands are just like,
Mhm.
The same old shit. So it's, once again, it's just a thing of never fitting in quite enough anywhere.
No, I mean that makes sense. And again, I think kind of going back to what I was originally saying, I think that's why you guys were the Trojan horse for me, because you did kind of straddle that line. And again, some of the other like stoner rock bands that I've heard, especially those in the scene, yeah, they have a lot of times kind of those watered down vocals, and it didn't work for me. And then you guys had some of those stoner rock riffs and the guitar work, but you had the heavy aggressive vocals, and I was like, man, this is a good marrying of these two musical types. And yeah, again,
Yeah.
I don't know why more people haven't thought of doing that. Like it
Well, it was a cool dynamic too, because I was really pushed for that shift over to like the more kind of stoner sludgy stuff, like what we would do on Northern Failures, the
Mhm.
record out Gutter Queen. But the funny, like in hindsight, it's actually really cool. Our guitar player, because we were down to a 3-piece at that point, he wasn't really into that stuff. He really liked, still liked a lot of the noise rock stuff, and even a bunch of other bands that we really bonded on were like Jawbox, Fugazi, Drive Like Jehu, Kerosene 454. Like we all like that stuff too. And he was like way into that and not so much into like the I Hate God, Buzz Oven. So he would almost like, I try to get him to just play like riffs.
Mhm.
If you listen to those records, a lot of times I'm the one playing the riffs on the bass and he's off kind of doing his own thing. And it would always frustrate me back in the day. I'm like, just make it heavy. Like, but in hindsight, I think it's cool because it adds a new dynamic to it. If you just played along to the riff the whole time, it'd probably just be boring. So
Yeah.
it was cool that he liked some of that stuff. He didn't like hate it, but he didn't like it like I did, where I was like buying full in, like let's just write all these bluesy, sludgy riffs and tune down to C. And he was like, yeah, cool. So he'd like play along with me for a couple of riffs, and then he would just go high up the neck and start making noise. And in hindsight, I'm glad he did, because I think it makes the records more interesting.
I'm glad that you shared that story, because that's always something I've wondered about when bands change their sound either moderately or significantly. like I'm always wondering in the back of my mind was everybody in the band, were they cool with like that sonic shift? Because like obviously the most like probably the popular one that always everybody thinks of is like when Caven released, the Jupiter, and they
Oh yeah.
completely changed their sound. Like I remember thinking like, really, all four of these dudes, like that's where all four of them are at musically, and nobody was pushing back during that writing process. But I mean, they went with it for a decade, so they must have all been about it. But it sounds like in your case, it was more of a like you had to kind of force them along a little bit. So
A little bit. He was a good team player. And but I would get on him a little bit, but at the end of the day I'd be like, I'll play the bass, you play the guitar,
mhm.
and we'll make this work. And I'm glad I wasn't as forceful about it, because I think in hindsight it just makes it more interesting, because it would have been very easy to fall into that trope I was just talking about, in that kind of stoner world where it's just like you can blues riff yourself to death and it just becomes like so boring. So I'm glad he did his own thing.
Absolutely. So then, kind of where does your trajectory bring you then after Northern Failures?
Well, after Northern Failures, which is a very different record than the one before it, again, we
Yes.
kind of, the records after that sort of make more sense, I think, in relation to one after the other. Uh, I was really, me and the drummer, especially, once again, we're all really getting into just more and more classic rock, and even like, the Allman Brothers and all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to just make like a rock and roll record. Like for Northern Failures, we tuned down to drop C, and I was like, you know what? Let's tune back to standard tuning and get a guitar player who can play solos. Let's get a
Wow.
second guitar player, but it's got to be someone who can shred. So Bernie went to college with this guy Ben, and ended up being his roommate in college, who was not part of the scene at all. He was kind of like a normie in a lot of ways. He was like a Pearl Jam guy. He liked like some cool things, but like nothing like in the world we were in. So he came and we started jamming with him, and I was just enamored by the fact that he could like solo, you know. So I was like, "God, this guy's in. Like, you know, you're in. You solo, you're in." So that's where the record Skyhorse Jams comes from, which came out around the same time as Northern Failures, but that's just because Northern Failures got delayed. They were recorded over a year apart, but they came out, I think, within 2 weeks of each other. So that was an intentional. That was intentional to have a record that was like guitar solos, full on, like still be loud, still be heavy, noisy, but I wanted to go back to standard tuning and just have guitar solos. And that's what we did. And a lot of people really hated that record when it came out. I think people were just like buying into Northern Failures, like, all right, I see what's going on here. And then we put out that record. And although it was similar in a lot of ways, it was very different. The guitar solos and standard tuning, and this really, really going hard for the rock and roll on that record. I think it probably bummed a lot of people out.
I do remember back in the day, like I remember downloading that one, and I remember like re-listening it. I was like, was this tagged wrong? Is this actually like is there a different cable? Because it threw me for a loop too, because like you said, it was right after Northern Failures, and I was
Right.
like, these kind of, but yeah, it's a bit of a departure. So I I
Yeah,
I guess that makes sense.
a lot of our friends were just like, "What are you guys doing? Man? Like, what are you doing?" I was like, "I don't know. We're just having a good time." And then we did a record after that, which is the other record behind you. Well, that's the reissue. It's the
Yes.
reissuing of that record, because the first pass at it was an absolute disaster. Um, so it was the same lineup of the band, but then we added a vocalist, Peter Ferris, who was a local guy. He went to college in Connecticut, and his old band, the Farewell Order, played some shows with Cable. And like I said before, I'm always trying to pawn off the front man duties. So I'm like, oh, this guy's a pretty good singer. Like, we got to talking, and he was into a lot of the same stuff. His band was more of like a chaotic, like Dillinger Escape Plan, Burnt by the Sun, like that kind of chaotic hardcore. But he was into like Caius and I Hate God and stuff like that. So I'm like, oh, kind of looking for someone to kind of be a lead vocalist. I kind of want to step away, maybe only sing a couple songs or something. So we brought him into the fold for what would be that record, Never Trust the Gemini. We stayed in the standard tuning, and there is some guitar solos on that record and stuff too. But I felt like kind of tried to move away from being so like out and out like rock and roll and kind of bring back a little bit more of the noisy stuff and kind of try to make the perfect cake, try to find the recipe we would do going forward. And I like the songs on that record a lot. And I really like what Pete did vocally on the songs he sang on that record. But our first, I don't know if you ever heard the original version of that record. It was really bad. The recording's bad. The mix was really bad. The artwork was really bad. And it was really kind of an unlistenable record. But I'm very happy we were able to go back in the studio not too long ago and fix that record. But that was the same lineup of the band as Skyhorse Jams. Just we added Pete on vocals and did some tweaking. I think the songs are a lot better than Skyhorse Jams. It's actually one of my favorite records in our catalog now that we're able to fix it.
When you re-recorded it, did Pete come back in too, or did you take over vocal duties then?
We didn't re-record it.
Okay.
We were able to get the master, the 2-inch tape that we recorded on. We had the masters, and I went into a studio up in Boston with my friend Alex called Mystic Valley Studios. He has a 2-inch tape machine. He's a fully analog studio, one of the only ones left in the United States. And he was able to go back, and we did a full remix, a full remaster, and I added vocals to the last track. Was originally an instrumental. And I added vocals. It was kind of a spontaneous thing. I didn't plan on doing it. We were doing mixing, and I was like, "Why did I never do vocals in this song? Like, it doesn't make any sense." He's like, "Go do vocals." And I just went in the other room. I wrote lyrics in like 10 minutes, and I was like, "Let me take a crack at it." I think I did 2 takes, and that's what ended up on the record. Used to be, I think it used to be called Counting Headstones. I think we changed the name to Shadow of the Gemini or something, but the original version was an instrumental. But we were able to really go in and do like a full true remix. It was weird. There was like guitar tracks that were completely pulled down in the mix that were really cool. Like he'd bring up these tracks and it'd be like, "That's the first time I've ever heard that." So if you A/B those records, or if you're familiar with the older version, they sound like different records in a lot of ways. So, but we didn't re-record anything besides that one track I added vocals to. It's all the original takes. It's just there was a lot of effects, bad effects we pulled off of stuff and EQ'd stuff properly, and it really made it come to life.
Was that I was kind of thinking for a while, like, was that the original plan then to slowly reissue your catalog? Because I was starting to get and then didn't the label like go under or something?
Our catalog is a chaotic story.
Because that's one of the things I want to talk to you about is like, it seems like you guys jump labels a little bit. It would be nice to get a big collection of everything, but you're jumping from here to there. So
that record originally was supposed to be our 3rd release on Hydra Head.
Okay.
It was supposed to be recorded by Steve Albini, and the artwork was supposed to be done by Derek Hess.
Wow.
Yeah. So we were like, living the dream at that moment, because I'm a huge fan of Steve Albini. I was a huge fan of Derek Hess art, especially back then. And then a series of cable-like events led us to getting dropped from Hydra Head, and justifiably so. I was upset at the time, obviously, but it was completely our fault. Like, we were canceling shows all the time. We were completely unreliable. We got booked on Hellfest as the last date of our tour for Northern Failures, the record before that. And we were there. We're supposed to play on Sunday. We showed up Saturday night, sold merch, and then left. Didn't tell the promoter. There was like 3,000 people there. It would have been the biggest show we ever played. We basically sold out of merch the night before we played. Like, there was tons of people there to see us. We sold a ton of merch, and we left and just didn't tell the promoter. So then the promoter is calling Aaron at Hydra Head the next day, like, "Where the fuck is Cable? They're not here. They never told me they were leaving. They're not here." That's one example of a million dumb things we did back then, which I take full ownership for. The whole band does. We did a
What
lot of shit.
was it, like a prank or?
No, it was just it's the last day of the tour, and I think we were just kind of burnt out. And no, it wasn't a prank. Like we were like seriously, like if we, it was something like well, we were drinking, of course, you know, and there was something to the effect like we didn't sell shit for merch on the whole tour. You know, like people started buying merch like crazy, and we're like, if we make it was some stupid low number too. It was like if we make $300 on merch, let's just go home. Like it was like so ridiculous. And somehow everyone was like, "Yeah, let's do that." So we did it, and it was a horrible fucking mistake. I mean, really the only regret I have is two regrets. Is that it definitely had a hand in us getting dropped from Hydra Head, a label I loved and wanted to stay on. And I feel bad for anyone who came to that show to see us and buy merch. So if any of those people were there by any chance and watch this, I sincerely apologize. So feel free to message me and tell me to fuck off. Yeah, so that record was supposed to come out under those circumstances, and we got dropped, and we were kind of scurrying for a label. And at the time, we were recording, and we were very friendly with Steve Austin from Today's the Day, and he had just put out a split on that label, Dark Rain, that it released the original version of that record. So that's how we ended up with that label. The same guy who did Skyhorse Jams. But then years later, Translation Loss was the label that reissued that. They're also the label that put out our last studio album, and they put out the Last Call collection, which is like a live set from CBGB's, kind of like a one song from each album, greatest hits type thing.
Okay.
And then there's a DVD that was a documentary about the band, which is completely useless now because that was supposed to be like the end of the band, and then we went on to make two more albums after that.
Of course.
So, yeah. So the good news is we're finally starting to get some of this stuff sorted out. We are still working with Translation Loss. 2026, we'll see a full vinyl reissue for Gutter Queen.
Oh yeah.
2027 will be Variable Speed Drive, and probably either late 27 or 28 will be Northern Failures. All remastered, all new artwork. Probably not CDs, but definitely vinyl reissues of all of those. And then we're in the process of cleaning up our streaming, because we've noticed on streaming, this like our records are all over the place. There's like other cables out there now too, and like two of our albums will be grouped with theirs, and another two of our albums will be grouped with some other band, and like it's a mess. The only real place right now where you can go find the stuff organized in some understandable fashion is our Bandcamp page. And you can go there and you can download pretty much all our records. There's two more I got to upload. Everything's free. If you want to pay $1, go ahead, whatever. But I encourage people to download it for free, stream it for free, whatever. I don't care about the money, but that's the best place to go at this moment to find cable music. That will change, and we're going to get everything straightened out with the other streaming services. Our stuff's up there. It's hard to find. It's usually better to search by the album title than the band name, because there are other cables out there now, and for some reason, I don't know how that world works, but the coding or something is all screwed up, and the records are just all over the place.
Yeah, I noticed on Discogs you guys are cable number 5 in the parentheses. I was like, really? They're the 5th cable? What about cables 1 through 4?
Right. Well, there was one from England. From England, I think they're an English band, and they sent us a cease and desist letter. This is way back, I think around the time of Variable Speed Drive, and we were just like, throw the garbage. Like, yeah, whatever. Sue us. Go ahead. Yeah. And they never did. So, but now there's like some I think there's like a fairly popular hardcore band from maybe Texas who's like gaining some popularity, and there's a band from New York, I think. I don't know.
None of them have Hydra Head releases, so you got to beat, dude.
Yeah, we should have a third one if we weren't such fuck ups.
For the collector nerds like me, if you're gonna slowly, put out a record a year, are you eventually gonna have a nice little box for me to put them all in?
Well, the guy we work with at Translation Loss is a maniac, and he loves to lose money. So cable is like his
That
favorite thing to lose money on. So
that is
we
what that's what Rennie has told me about Starkweather as well. The guy from
yes,
Translation Lost told him the same thing. So
I love Starkweather.
I I
Um,
love that kind of hardcore business model. That's great for
yeah,
me.
well, if you're a Starkweather fan, there is some exciting Starkweather news coming down the road too, in the way
Ooh,
of reissues through
ooh.
translation loss as well. Yeah, we've talked about doing that, and that's funny because we're working on the art. The Gutter Queen art is almost done, and it's the most important one because the other two records, I want them to look like a set. Like the artwork will be a similar pattern on all three records. So that's why we're really kind of toiling away at this first one to try to get it. So I want them to all look the same. They'll have like a different image on the front, but they'll all be set up, laid out the same way. So I've talked about that with Christian, the guy my connect at Translation Lost. And I was like, what if we set aside like 25 of each and did some kind of slipcase box with like maybe an extra 7-inch or something that we could put in the box that's not in the records. And I could probably talk him into it because I can usually talk him into wasting his money on cable.
Take my money, Translation Lost, please.
He's usually pretty good about that.
So I guess then what ultimately leads to the disillusion of cable?
Well, I mean, there was many disillusions along the way. Dissolutions along the way. We were famous for breaking up, getting back together, putting out an album, breaking up before it came out, canceling tours. I mean, what's tying into this story I just told you about the Hellfest and getting dropped? We were a mess in pretty much every way possible. You know, like there were times when the drinking and the recreational drugs were becoming more than recreational, and there was just a lot of we don't give a fuck, and was a lot of stupidity along the way. It makes for some good stories, but it does not help in getting the name of the band out there. So there was many different breakups along the way. Everything kind of came to a head before we made the last album, Take the Stairs to Hell, with me and the drummer, who have been really great friends at the beginning of the band. We were best men at each other's wedding. We just somehow couldn't get along, and I ended up kicking him out of the band and making a record without him. That was the last record, and that led to a long, lengthy 5 or 6 year like blood feud between me and him, which thankfully has been resolved, and we're great friends once again, and hopefully making music again soon. So that was after that record. We made that record, and in typical cable fashion, the record came out. We didn't play a single show, didn't tour, and then that was for me like the band is over now, and the band has stayed over since that. I never say cable is over and we're not going to play or make a record or play or show, because I've said that so many times, and we have. But Take the Stairs to Hell, I believe that came out in 2019. I can't even remember, but we haven't done anything. We played one show. Actually, that was before the record. So yeah, when that record came out, that's the last thing we've done. So we've been completely inactive for about 5 years.
I mean, it sounds like you're going to owe it to Christian if you're going to talk him into the slipcases to do at least one release show for every record, right? Like,
Oh man.
and then I could finally say that I have an excuse to visit the great state of Connecticut.
I'm sorry. Where did you grow up again, or were you
I
living?
grew up right outside of Chicago, but I live in Indianapolis now. So,
Okay. Yeah, we only played in Indianapolis once in 2000. Yeah, I think it was 2000. Chicago, we played twice, but it was very early on. Yeah, I don't know. As far as playing goes, maybe. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, me and Vic, the drummer, have been playing, not under anything the guise of like we're gonna do cable stuff, but we've actually been playing with Matt Becker, who is the original guitar player. He plays on Variable Speed Drive and the demo and the 7 inches and stuff. So we've been having fun playing in my basement and writing a couple songs, but I don't know. I don't even know. It probably won't even be called Cable. We might just call it something else. It might not last more than another month. I don't know. But I never say never anymore. Like if the reissues come out and people seem like they might be interested, then I'm sure we'd at least entertain it. I mean, I look at a lot of bands that contemporaries in the fact that we existed at the same time and played similar shows. Like Dead Guy is experiencing an incredible resurgence right now. Botch, Cave In. I mean, Converge never went away.
No.
They've always done their thing. But a lot of these bands from the '90s are like going out and playing, and people seem to really care. I'm not so sure people are going to care if we play, but it's nice to see some of these bands getting their. I mean, I've seen Dead Guy a lot and see them playing to 10 or 15 people. Now they sell out every show they play, and they should. They're a great band.
Their new album was much better than I expected it to be. I was blown away by it.
Me too. I know all those guys on a level where like say hi to them. I'm not friends with any of them. Tim, I'm probably the most friendly with. Me and him have talked a lot and stuff. A great guy, and I was always a huge Dead Guy fan. The band was very important to me and Cable, but I didn't have super high hopes. And I got to say, the record's pretty awesome. It is. I'm really stoked for those guys, man. They deserve it.
Cool. So then, we definitely have to touch on some of these other bands. I guess let's touch on ISIS first, just because that seems like the shortest little stint. Kind of how did that come about, and how did that end, or how did you kind of separate from the band?
Yeah. So when ISIS kind of the early days, just starting out, recording their demos, playing their first couple shows, Cable played. This sounds so funny in hindsight to say, the first two shows ISIS ever played, like, was with Cable. We brought them to play there. Like they played before us, which is funny to think about now. We played a show up in Montreal, and then we played a show in Burlington, Vermont, like right over the line, coming back into States from Canada. And we had already worked with Aaron, who was already getting ready to put out Gutter Queen. Gutter Queen came out right around the time we did those two shows with them, the first two ISIS shows. I think Gutter Queen had just come out. So we had already met him. And our old bass player, the guy I replaced, Jeff, he had moved to Boston to go to school for recording. He ended up being roommates with Aaron Turner from Hydra Head.
Wow.
So that's how that whole connection kind of started. And very quickly after Jeff moved to Boston, Aaron's band he was playing in at the time, they were called Union Suit. They split up. So him and Jeff talked about starting a new band. Around the time Gutter Queen was getting ready to come out, so Aaron was like, "You guys going to tour this summer?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's do a tour." So I was like, "Let's do an Cable ISIS tour," because they had a demo. They just recorded a demo, and then the first Drowning Man record was getting ready to come out, so they were supposed to be on the tour too. They ended up dropping. They didn't go on the tour, but the first ISIS tour we took them on their first tour, which is so ridiculous to even think about now, but they just asked me to play second guitar, and I did. After those two shows we did, I really liked them. I was friends with them, and I'm like, yeah, I really like this band. Fuck it, I'm gonna play guitar. So I ended up moving to Boston. My Cable was still going, we were getting ready to do that tour, and then Vic got really mad, I think, that I was joining ISIS because he felt like I was kind of betraying the Cable thing. And he ended up quitting before the tour, like a week before the tour. So we had to scramble and find a drummer. Our friend Dale from the band Glaze Baby was going to fill in. And then like the day before, he's like, I can't get the time off work. I can't go. So Aaron Harris, the drummer of ISIS, played drums for us on that tour. He played in Cable with me, and I played in ISIS with him. So we both played 2 sets every night on that.
Wow.
And we practiced once the night before we left. We practiced once. So we did like 6 Cable songs. We did a Melvins cover. and then we just made a bunch of noise for a while. But we pulled it off. We did the tour. We pulled it off. So yeah, that's by the end of that tour though, I had realized like I didn't really want to play guitar in ISIS. I wasn't getting along with some of the people in the band, so I just stepped away from it. Um, Another not so great decision because ISIS went on to do incredible things, you know. But it's fine because I'm great friends with all those guys. Jeff is still one of my best friends. I'm still very friendly with Aaron, both Aarons. Yeah, there was never any bad blood or anything like that. Like I always wish the best for those guys, and I would always go see them when they came around, and I still do. I still go see Sumac when they come around and hang out with Aaron. I just seen him a couple months ago. They were incredible, and it was great to see him. So yeah, it just didn't work out, you know, for whatever reason. I was not in a great place in my life. You know, I had a lot going on and was drinking too much, and I was a mess. There was a couple of years there. I was a real mess of a human being. So it was probably better for them that I stepped away too, because they got Mike Gallagher came on board right after I left, and the rest is history. You know.
So all these other bands too, by the way, do they all coincide with your time in cable? You were just like, yeah, I got time. I could just.
So yeah, sort of. Some of them were a product of cable. Cable broke up. Let's do a new band. Some of them were simultaneous. Empty Flowers was Cable had called it quits. Empty Flowers started. Empty Flowers stopped. The next time Cable reformed. Uh, when I was in Tombs for a little while, that was when Cable was not functioning. And then as soon as I left Tombs is when we made the last Cable record. When I found out we weren't going to do anything to support that record, I got asked to join Come to Grief. So I joined Come to Grief. So yeah, it was all these last 3 years. I haven't really done anything. And it's the first time since I was a teenager that I've had like nothing going on, no musical projects going on. So
Is it weird for you? Like, do you find you have to kind of develop new hobbies if you're not throwing your
um,
bass around all day? Or
I got to be honest. It's the first like 6 months. It was like really nice. I could like I didn't have to worry about learning these songs, learning the set, writing new material, like going to practice. But the last 2.5 years, I've basically been in like a panic. I don't know what to do with myself. Um, I still kind of live out in the middle of nowhere, so it's not like I live in a city and I can just go out and find people to play. I'm 53. Um, no offense to any of the youth out there, but I don't really want to be in a band with people that are 20. Uh, you know, so it's hard to find people to play with. Um, I've made many attempts to try to find people to play with, and it's just not really. But it's been scary. I'll be honest. It's scary because I don't, it's all I do. I don't have any other hobbies. I don't play golf. I don't go fishing. I play in bands. That's what I do. You know, I write songs, and I've kind of hit a wall. I can't find anyone to play with. You know, like it's been depressing. It really has. Like it wasn't until recently that I've started picking up my bass again and writing. And like I said, I've been very casual, but playing with Vic and Matt, and we have a couple songs we're working on, and I'm having a lot of fun again, and I'm inspired to play again. So maybe this will become something. But the last 3 years have been kind of terrifying. I got to be honest with you. I don't know when I'm not working or doing stuff with my wife or my family. I don't know what to do with myself. It's really kind of scary. It is.
you'd think with, how available the technology is, it'd be pretty fairly easy for you to, get a set of in-ear monitors and practice remotely with whomever. I'm sure you have a pretty big network of people that, hey, do you just want to knock the song out? Like, just try it out and see where we can go. Like,
I've had offers to do stuff like that, and then that's more my own. I'm just old school. Like I want to get in a room and turn the amps up loud. And I like technology's great. I've resisted it now for a long time. I don't even know how to use GarageBand. I mean, I record voice memos on my phone just because I can hit record and we play a song. But like, I don't know. I find something so, and it's a great tool, and like people that do amazing things now that work remotely. I just feel it's so, for me personally, I feel it It's very stale and very stagnant, and I don't get the same out of it. I have to be like standing, a foot from the drummer, and my ears have to hurt. I have to practice, and like, I want drumsticks flying, and like, I just feel like that's music to me. That's part of what I get out of it. Like recording a file and sending it to somebody. Hey, man, if that's your thing, cool. And it's an extremely useful tool. And if I got better at doing it, I could probably do a lot of cool stuff with a lot of different people, but I just always resist it. Every year I'm like, all right, this year I'm learning GarageBand. This laptop I'm talking to you on, I bought like 14 years ago to use GarageBand. I've never even opened it. So it's a thing with me. I'm just old and I'm stuck in my ways. And I just love the energy of being in a room and sweating and having the amps being loud. But to me, that's creating, like, just for me. I know other people do things their way, and they do amazing things that way. I'm not downing on it at all. It's just for me, I don't get any enjoyment out of that.
That is perfectly fair. I can understand that. I know you said you don't really have any hobbies, but Dan did kind of send me a list of questions he wanted me to ask in his absence,
Okay.
and he understands that you are a huge horror movie nerd. What are some
Yeah.
of your favorites?
I really like old horror movies, meaning like anything from like the mid to late 80s back to like
Okay.
the Universal movies from the black and white Frankenstein movies and Dracula movies. I love Hammer films, the Christopher Lee Dracula
Yes.
movies and the Hammer Frankenstein movies. I love that stuff. I love the atmosphere of that. I understand they're not amazing films, but I love that stuff. I grew up an 80s kid, so I grew up with, Halloween, Friday the 13th, like the early slasher movies, Return of the Living Dead. Um, I think some of my favorites and some of the best horror movies ever made, I would say The Exorcist. I was one of the only two movies that ever scared the shit out of me, but like a lot of people, I saw it way too young.
Of course. Yes.
That's probably why it scared the shit out of me. The other movie I love that scared the shit out of me was the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Um, Once again, I saw that way too young, but the atmosphere of that movie, it's just could never be recreated. It makes me feel gross. Like it's just how it looks, how it sounds. Like I'm sure you've seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes.
The scene when Leatherface slams the door and just the noise that makes. It's like little things like that. I love practical effects. I get this age we live in now, everything is digital and CGI. There's some cool stuff for sure, but like I like the atmosphere of horror movies. It can be a shitty, horrible movie, but if it has the right atmosphere, I'm all in. Like I love an old film called Psychomania. It's like an old biker movie, but it's a horror movie. It goes by the title The Death Wheelers as well. It's from the 70s. I can remember exactly when. There's an old zombie movie called Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue that I really like. The Wicker Man, the original Wicker Man.
I just watched that for my first time like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, did you like it?
It was great.
Yes,
Great.
I love.
Again, Christopher Lee, amazing.
Yes. If I spun this computer up that way, I have a huge Wicker Man poster. Yeah, I love that. I mean, horror. I mean, I'm a huge David Cronenberg fan, so pretty much all of his earlier work is mostly horror themed. I know he's gone some other places. Huge David Cronenberg fan. My favorite director of all time was David Lynch. Rest in peace. A lot of people consider his movies horrifying. I don't know if they are horror movies per se, but yeah. So that's definitely more of an old head, when it comes to horror. I've seen some new stuff that I really liked. Hereditary was a movie that kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
I kind of get the same vibes from that as I did The Exorcist. Like if someone's too young seeing Hereditary, they're going to remember that movie for the rest of their life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like Beyond the Black Rainbow. I don't know if you
Oh
saw
yeah,
that.
yeah.
The Lighthouse, which is arguably not a horror movie, but made by a director who's made, The Witch, which is a horror movie. So yeah, a lot of new stuff though, man. I'm like that grumpy old guy, dude. You know, I'm like, I can find a problem with almost any newer movie. I'm like too much CGI. That's always my go-to. I don't like the CGI, the fake blood. I'm a big fan of like Tom Savini and those old school Greg Nicotero. This guy like the
Yep.
like a movie like The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing. Like the effects in that are just unbelievable, and like how they did that stuff is unbelievable. You know, and that's like I'm not saying these people aren't talented, but I guess it kind of ties in what you asked me about recording remotely. It's like some guy on a laptop making fake blood as opposed to like, you know, three people trying to find the right mixture of like food coloring and like whatever. Um, there was like real art to that stuff. You know, there's like a real, like you had to suffer for your art kind of thing. Like, how are we going to make this work? So I really appreciate that in those old horror movies too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. Like the older ones are definitely better. I mean, it's one of those things like, every once in a while, like you'll hear like, whatever, Sam Raimi's coming out with a new horror movie. It's like it's not gonna be that good. Like I can already tell you. Like
Yeah, I agree. I'm very cynical. I always argue with Jeff, who played bass in ISIS, and early on in cable. He's one of my best friends, and he is a horror nut. He knows 10 times what I could ever know. He does a horror podcast actually with Mike Hill from Tombs,
ooh.
called Necromaniacs, which is really cool. And yeah, we argue all the time about horror. It's funny because he finds a lot more in the newer stuff that he likes, and we're always arguing about it, which is fun.
When you guys especially with you watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre probably too young and it kind of staying with you your whole life, were there ever, periods of time where you guys were on tour and you're driving through these old back roads and you're like, oh my God, I hope we don't drive through a town and become, victims in some kind of weird cannibalistic family.
Oh yeah, there was a on the variable speed drive tour, the first tour we did in '96 for the first record. We were driving from Memphis, Tennessee, to Little Rock, Arkansas.
Ooh.
So it was a night drive. We played, loaded out, and drove all night, kind of thing. And we were about to pull away from the show in Memphis, and remember the promoter coming up to the window of the van and he's like, "You guys are driving to Little Rock tonight?" And we're like, "Yeah." Or Lafayette, not Little Rock, Lafayette. He's like, "Be careful." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Oh, you got to go through like the Delta." I'm like, "What's the Delta?" He's like, "Oh, it's a stretch of road that like, kind of goes to the Ozark Mountains or something." He's like, "Gets real weird out there at night." Like, all right, whatever, dude. So we drove for a long time, and then finally we had to get gas. We pulled off the interstates in this some backwards ass town, dude. They had like all kinds of crazy stuff, like these jars of like pig's feet and like pickled pig's ears. It looked like the lab from Reanimator in there. It was so creepy. And then as soon as we pulled out, about to get on the highway, blue lights behind us.
Ooh.
And it was these two Arkansas cops. Like it was like 3 a.m, pitch blackout, mirrored sunglasses, and they're like, we had an old van with stickers all over the back. So if they were like, "Oh, who are these fucking guys? They probably got drugs," and they made us get out of the van. They pulled all of the gear out of the van. Luckily, at that time, none of us really did drugs. A year later, we would have been fucked. But we had a baseball bat that said "God, Jesus loves you" on it, and apparently they don't like that shit down on the Bible Belt. So they
Ooh.
gave us a really hard time. And one of the guys, this is a quote we used in one of our songs. This guy's like, call the dogs. We're going to run the dogs through your heart, not your van."
Wow.
To this day, I still don't know what that really means. But yeah, there's a line and a song on. We'll get into Gutter Queen later. But that story ties into the Gutter Queen lyrics.
I love it. That
Yeah.
is
So yes, there is a time where I thought like no one's ever going to see us again. They're going to push our van into a swamp. We're going to be like in the basement of like some police station being tortured.
um Dan's next question is on your live album, Last Call. You have a
Yep.
song called Gutter Queen, but it's never been properly released. Do you ever have plans to release that? Is that maybe going to be in this bonus 7-inch that we were joking around about, or?
We have talked about doing that. Honestly, we've talked about it a lot. Yeah, that song was written That was the first new song we wrote post Variable Speed Drive. It's
Okay.
the first song we wrote for Gutter Queen. That version's a live version from a show we played in Providence with Kiss of Goodbye in like summer of 1996, I think. That's the only recording we have of it. We never did a demo of it, never recorded it in the studio. There's no other live. That's the only existing version of that. We have talked about recording that. Will that happen? Who knows? Maybe. I'll give it a hard maybe. I like the song. I think it'd be cool to record it. So that would be if we ever find our way back in the studio, that would be on the table to do. Yeah.
Um, Dan is wondering, maybe now that you're getting kind of back into music, you have thoughts on ever doing another concept album?
Yeah, I've had thoughts on it.
I think, like we were talking about with the state of the world today, I think it could lend itself pretty well to a fair amount of concepts.
Yeah, there's plenty of material out there these days. That's for sure. It's one good thing about Misery. Like you can always pull a lot of material from Misery. Like at least I'm speaking for myself, I guess. When I'm in a good mood and when I'm happy about things, I don't feel inspired to write. Like I'm not trying to be like this esoteric guy, dark guy, but like I don't get inspired to write when like my life's going good and I'm in a good mood and like I really dig my job and it's when I'm angry or like that's when I get inspired to do shit. I mean, hey, maybe that's why I'm getting inspired to do shit again. I mean, turn on the news. That's all you got to do. Turn on the news. If you don't get inspired to write something or if that doesn't get you angry, I don't know what will. It's I'm not trying to get all political, but the world is a pretty disgusting place in a lot of ways right now. To answer your question, concept album. If I make any album again, I would be psyched. I mean, I wouldn't take it off the table. I've wanted to make a concept album before we made the failed Convict. I wanted to make a concept album in like 99, 2000. That was kind of a failed attempt and then ended up happening with the failed Convict. But I don't have like a really great not that was a great concept. I think there's a lot of things we could have did better with that record. It's fine, but I wanted it to be more grandiose. I had big ideas for that, and we executed some of them, but not all of them. So I wouldn't take it off the table, but most likely no. But I don't know.
Fair enough. And then I have the one normal closing question, and then I have the new one that we've been throwing around. So the
Okay.
first one, I think you're gonna have a good answer. I know you're gonna have a good answer because Shane has had the best answer so far, so I know you can top him.
I don't know if I can top Shane on anything in life, but I'll give it a shot.
So the question is, right, you talked a lot about all of your influence, the bands that kind of got you into the scene and all the bands you listen to and like your rediscovery of old real country music and all of that. Any bands, any genres, any movements, anything at all, whether in the scene or outside of the scene, present or past, that you didn't like, you didn't understand, any bands you beefed with, anything that you had a problem with?
I can't really remember any specific beef. Like you mean like did Cable have beefs with other bands or like me personally?
Possibly, or like if you had a time machine, you could go back in time and like, I don't know, start trouble with, I don't know, whatever, the Van Halen or something. Like, would you? Because Shane's whole thing was Led Zeppelin, and he gave me like a 10-minute speech about Led Zeppelin and how terrible and how overrated they are, and that's Shane being Shane. So I think I think you can top that.
Wow. I mean, damn, you're putting me on the spot. Now, I don't know. I mean, God, there's a lot of bands I don't like. I mean, I really hate the Foo Fighters.
Fair.
Um, I, I don't know specifically what I hate about them. I don't like Dave Grohl, I guess, in general. That kind of bums me out. He's always screaming about punk rock, and I know he was a DC guy and he was in Mission Impossible and He was in Scream, but here's one of my problem. All right, you gotta get me.
There you go. I love it. See,
here's like my beef with him, right? Is that he always seems to like loves to like pound his fist on the table about like just like this punk guy, man. I'm just like this punk guy. But like anything he's ever done that's cool was not something that he walked into after it existed. He played drums in Scream, but he was not the original drummer for Scream. Scream did like 4 albums or 3 albums before he was ever in the band. He played drums in Nirvana. He wasn't the original drummer for Nirvana. He was the drummer when they got huge, but they had an album and other singles and shit before he was ever in the band. He played drums at a Killing Joke record. He wasn't the drummer for Killing Joke. Like Killing Joke was around for 25, 30 years before he was in Killing Joke. Same thing with Queens of the Stone Age. Played drums in Queens of the Stone Age. They already had 2 albums out and were becoming a huge band well before he was in the band. The Foo Fighters just fucking suck. So who cares about the Foo Fighters? Like the one band that he's like, this is my band. Yeah, of course it is. It sucks. It's your band. And I don't know. I've just read interviews with him and shit. Like all those guys from the DC scene and everything, like really seem to like him, and that's cool. I guess he grew up with him and stuff, but he's just very off-putting to me. I remember one interview I saw with him or something. It was one of the Foo Fighters records. I don't know what the fuck it was called, but he's like, yeah, this is like our punk record. I made it in my garage. Well, that's cool. But what he did is he bought Sound City fucking studio in LA, that like really famous studio. They did a documentary about it. He bought the board and had it set up in his garage. So his garage is probably like the size of, 4 of my houses. And they're like recording on the Sound City board in his garage, and they're swimming in his pool, and his fucking catering team's making him dinner. Like, oh, they're gonna get Bob Mould over here to sing on the song because this is a punk record. He's a punk, right? Well, yeah, that's a difference. He is, and you're not. But I don't know. He irritates the shit out of me. I don't like him. I don't like I don't like him, and I don't like the Foo Fighters. It's just like such. It's everything I hate about rock and roll. The Foo Fighters are everything I hate about rock and roll.
that was the perfect response, sir. Thank you. You know, I remember when I saw the that Salad Days documentary, right, about DC hardcore or whatever,
Yeah,
and
of course.
like, yeah, every other scene, like Dave Grohl's popping up there to give his opinion. I was like, okay, like I get it. Again, you're part of the
Right.
DC scene, but you moved to California fairly early on. Like the scene continued for a long time after you, and
Guess
it's
what? Still continuing.
it's okay.
Uh, there was this other fucking thing too. What was it on? It was on like, oh no, it was I think I saw it on YouTube, but they did this thing. Maybe it was right before COVID. The Foo Fighters were like, we're gonna do a van tour. So they played like some shows on the West Coast, and they had this like 15-passenger van. I'm like, what are you trying to prove, dude? Like, you could each take private fucking jets to the show. Like you're in a van again, so like you're cool. Like, what are you doing? It's just he goes out of his way to make an ass of himself. It's just like, dude, be rich, be cool. It doesn't matter what fucking I say about you. You're a fucking billionaire. Like, why do you? He has to do this thing where I feel like he's constantly trying to prove like his credibility. Like, no, I'm not like this douchebag rock star. I'm a cool guy.
I
Okay.
can I can shred with a broken leg.
Yeah, not only that, I can have a throne that they wheel me out on. Like, it'd be fucking cool if you went out there with like one crutch and like shredded.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah,
That would be undeniably cool, and I think you would respect him a little more because of that.
he'll have a van. His van brings him to the fucking stage. He's not touring in it. It's like his transpo from the fucking dressing room to the stage. Like, I don't know. I just feel like in a way, like he just like kind of spits in the face of punk rock. Like, yeah, man, cool. You're a punk in DC, and maybe you did some cool shit. And you're not a horrible guy, but like, I don't know. I just feel like he cheapens it. It's just like he's trying to hold on to this. I don't know. I don't like it. I don't like him.
I love it. So then the final question, speaking of being millionaires, right? So in that alternate dimension where cable made it big, you guys are going on huge stadium tours, with Foo Fighters opening up for you, in fact. Um,
Oh, fantastic.
what is on your rider?
To get the Foo Fighters off the tour.
So after they get kicked off the tour and you replace them with Guar or whatever, like what's on your rider?
Oh, I don't know, man. I'm a simple guy. I've never even dreamed of having a rider. Like if we got a case of beer at a show, it was like, holy shit, dude, we got a case of beer. Uh, I don't know, man. Pretty simple. Just something to eat, like maybe something I'm a little older now, so maybe something healthy to eat, like maybe some mineral water and some bananas.
There you go.
I don't have a cool answer. Well, of course, tons of hookers,
Of course.
cocaine,
Yeah.
that kind of shit. Yeah, I don't know, man. I like to think if we were ever in that position that we would kind of refer back to not being growlish and just be like, yeah, can we just have like some decent food to eat and some water or something, and not be like rock star douchebags. Like, yeah, you've seen some of these riders. You can go
Oh yeah.
online, these bands riders, and it's just like, they just take 90% of this shit and throw it away.
Of course. Yeah.
And once again, it's just like so disgusting to me. Like, yeah, I don't know. If we had a rider, it would just be very simple. I like to think it'd be very simple. I can't speak for the other guys in the band. Maybe they would do something fucking ridiculous, but for me, it would just be very simple. I don't know. A good burrito and some bananas or something.
It's actually funny because that question, at least I might be remembering the story completely wrong, but it was actually inspired by Foo Fighters because it was a long time ago. I feel like I read in an interview or read somewhere that was one of their riders. They wanted like a gigantic bowl, but it was like only green M&Ms or green skin. Like it was only one color.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Does that come from them? That story?
that's where I originally heard it. I don't know if it's true or not. Like, I don't want to, throw it out
I
to the internet as if it's gospel, but that's what it was originally thinking about. I was like, what kind of idiot only wants the one color? And that was like, obviously now you can go to the M&M store, you could buy a single color. But at the time that came out, like you had to open up like 27 packages and take all the other colors and throw them out. Like, come on, how wasteful is that? Who
why
cares?
is that? That doesn't surprise me.
They're all the
But
same. They taste the
that,
same.
I've heard that story forever, but I never could remember who the band was, or maybe I've heard it's been different band. I don't know, but like, yeah, shit like that, dude. It just fucking disgusts me. It just disgusts me. Like, oh, I need Gatorade, but I only want the summertime peach flavor. Nothing else can do for me. I need to rock hard tonight. I have to have my flavored Gatorade, the right flavor. I
But
don't
you
know, man.
do get the wrong flavor.
I like to think it's like the same similar question, like if you ever won the lottery, or
Mhm.
kind of like, you know, I like to think I could be like a responsible adult and
Yeah.
just you know what, man? If I'm not trying to sound like some prophet or anything here, but if I had some like fuck you money like that, where I could put solid gold faucets in my house, I would like to be able to like help people.
Oh yeah.
I'd like to be able to like maybe feed some homeless people, or do something cool for somebody besides just blow it on dumb shit like green M&Ms and fucking maybe Dave Grohl could buy some condoms so he's not knocking up fucking people outside of his marriage. Maybe that would be something.
Uh,
Mr. Cool Guy.
I think again that's what makes you the true punk rocker, right? Because you were influenced by that ethos and that's what you would do with yourself. And that's the
Yeah.
answer to what would you do with that money? Would you be a decent human being or would you, buy a board from a famous studio and renovate your garage in your mansion, right? That's what
I
people do
mean,
with their money.
I would upgrade my vinyl collection
Of
and
course.
probably have a really sick stereo system. But like, I get grossed out, man, by like I see people on the highway with like these stupid fucking, like $500,000 or whatever $1 million sports cars,
Hmm.
and sometimes I go to these neighborhoods, or my old job, I used to deliver furniture, and I go to some of these houses, and I'm like, it's just fucking gross, man. It's gross. It's just excess. It's just excess to like, I don't even understand it. I really don't. It makes me feel gross. Like that so many people care about that shit. Like it's all fucking stuff, dude. It's meaningless.
Hmm.
It's fucking meaningless. And it's always bummed me out, man. Like, yeah, that does come from the punk rock thing. I feel like,
There you go. Punk rock saved us both, man. That's a good
Yeah.
good closing statement for this conversation. So Randy, thanks again for hanging out, talking all things music, and
Once I hit the Badlands, I knew these were the bad times. Out there in the Badlands, it looks like I'm in a hole. I'm running out of river. I've seen what the water's done to everyone and everything. I watched Jesus pass me by. Out here where the river came from me too. Never surrender, never surrender. Polish your guns, polish your guns. We are cavemen, ready to watch each other die. Deep in city spotlights, come and get me out. Righteous back, polish your guns. Jesus, one way. Polish your guns. Jesus, one way. Into the fighting, Jim's gone to the goal of Texaco. Into the fighting, Jim's gone to the goal of Texaco. Swim or fucking die.
welcome back. I sincerely hope that you enjoy that discussion with Randy. Like I said, kind of at the beginning, kind of an amazing dude. Lots of great stories. Super honest. Kind of pull back the curtain, let me see and let me hear and let me understand all things that went on, kind of with him musically, challenges, everything else. So that was great. What is on the horizon for Randy is not too much in the immediate future. But as you heard as part of the conversation, Cable is getting some more deluxe reissues along the, well, not necessarily deluxe, but fancy vinyl reissues along the way from their good friends over at Translation Loss. The next one coming up is going to be Gutter Queen, which is actually perfect because spoiler alert, that's what we're discussing next week. Um, but yeah, that is coming out in spring, sometime. Don't have a definite release date yet, but again, Translation Loss is putting that out. It'll be vinyl and then a digital reissue as well. He talked during the episode about kind of getting all of their digital tracks in order, applying them to the correct band, just kind of all of that organization that needs to happen to make sure that all of you Cable fans out there can get all of the music and access it and be able to listen to it, and it's all under the correct cable and not some weird other cable, which is always interesting. So yeah, that was a great episode. We will catch you next week. I kind of already spoiled it, but yeah, we're going to be discussing all things Gutter Queen. And I do want to say, I'll probably repeat this next week for the intro as well. Dan and I were going back and forth quite a bit. Unfortunately, he couldn't make this episode as well. Um, But he was super pumped about having Randy on. We're both longtime Cable fans, and we were going back and forth between Gutter Queen and Northern Failures. At the moment, that I was leaning a little more towards Gutter Queen, especially with Clinton Street Blues, which actually became like an inflection point for the entire conversation, which was nice. And then, kind of as we were approaching the episode, Dan was heavily involved in re-listening to both of the albums, and he came back and was like, "No, I really think we should do Northern Failures." And at that point, we were kind of already committed to Gutter Queen. But either way, like those two albums, from the sake of nostalgia, obviously, Randy has different preferences, and if you listen to some of their later stuff as well, lots of good stuff on all of that. But just based on, again, kind of the nostalgia fest that this show sometimes leans fairly heavily into, it was really a toss up between Gutter Queen and Northern Failures. It was close enough that it probably could have been a coin toss, but it was Gutter Queen that made it. So, and like I said, topically, that is what's going to be next on the reissue list. So we'll look out for that, as we have a release date. Cable will update their socials. I will put a blast on for ours as well. Always happy to promote bands for people that have spare time to sit down and chat with us here. So, again, thank you for listening to With the Band Man. We will see you next week, and enjoy whatever this week brings you. Hopefully, you are not going to be traveling via plane like I am. A little bit of uncertainty as to what travel looks like with the TSA situation. Flight out looks good on Monday, flight back on Friday. So let's hope I do not get stuck in some airports over the weekend. That would not be fun. So enjoy your week, and we'll catch up with you next week.
You'd better make room for me. I'm coming through with my ego. And your band is really right.